Still looking at these divergences. Here it is on momentum, not done yet. Day finish if we start seeing a sell-off with the semiconductors, but again, could buy us more time. If we look at, and let me just bring up the close-up here. Do we see the upper Bollinger Band just tagged here, and we start a reversal off of it, like over here or over here, or do we see a push above it? And I talked about this example right here. Here we, we came up and we tried to get above it there, but then we kind of just straddled, and then we got above it here. Then we closed below it and got the sell-off. And again, maybe we have that here, just tagging it. We got a reversal. After this big, ugly red bar, we still rebounded back up to the 78.6 Fibonacci. So we'll be watching to see what happens here. Do we start a bigger sell-off? Get some evidence of a peak, or again, is it not done yet? So again, I'll be watching. Do we see divergences develop? MACD could roll over. We could start seeing some weakness with the semiconductors, further weakness with the semiconductors if those divergences can't develop. 60-minute charts, we rally with the semiconductors, then the odds greatly favor we're going to see those divergences develop. And that's why I'm showing you. And again, I'll be watching how this unfolds. So far, we've just tagged it. Now, the S&P did close above the upper band. I've talked about the Bollinger Bands here on the S&P. We did close above it. We did not on the NASDAQ. We only tagged it on an intraday basis and moved above it and then turned down off of it. Closed it, got back above it. Do we get something like this? Maybe we do, because again, here we, got this push above it, closed below it, and then we kind of went back up and tried to get back above it, straddled along the upper band there, and then it ended up failing, and we got this, the July sell-off. Get something similar to that here. Well, it looks very similar. You got a big up day, a down day, big up day, big down day, and now you get this rebound day. Here we had a rebound. We got a inverted hammer candlestick that ended up taking us higher. Do we get something like that? Again, straddle along the upper band as it rises, or maybe get back above it again. We'll be watching. Buy a little bit more time with some of these divergences. Oh, could. Let me just say this. Again, the time is short. Again, I was looking for new all-time highs on the S&P 500. We're there as long as that gap. I was looking for that gap to fill. Looking for a top to develop around that gap to fill on NASDAQ. It does finish. Maybe it's done. Maybe it's not. Again, I don't have enough evidence yet, but I think the possibility of divergences on the 60-minute charts. But when it's done, again, S&P very well could peak, and it could look something like this in a few days. Now, let me say this. We're going to get on Friday a 9-count sell signal if the rally can continue. If we get something like this right here, over here at the July peak, if we get something very similar to that to form a divergence, which we completed, if we get something that looks like that here and here surrounding the upper Bollinger Band, well, we can complete a 9-count. Now remember, NASDAQ already got our 13 countdown sell signal quickly, and again, we went a little bit higher, still may go a little bit higher, and again, a potential rising wedge, but again, I'm looking for a turn. Here we got the 9 count, we went higher one more day, a little bit higher, and then got the turn. Over here we got the 9 count, that's when I called the top right there. That helped me call the top. I told you I thought the 10th was the top for other reasons as well, those trend lines on the longer term charts. I got a 9-9 signal here. Again, these the pullback here, they mark points with price exhaustion, and again, that's probably what we're going to see happen here. Now, maybe it's done. Maybe we just went up a little bit higher. That's it, and it's turned, but we could still form those divergences on the hourly charts before all is said and done. We already had a 13 count here. We had started to complete a 9 count. It got wiped out with the semiconductor sell-off yesterday, but we still have a potential 9 count to develop on the S&P. We've got a 13 here. Do we get a 9 count? Daily chart of the S&P by Friday certainly could if the rally can resume. Don't forget we had that 9 count on the Dow and the S&P. Here's the S&P in the weekly time frame, and again, we had a strong close last week. We had a 5-week winning streak. Told you to be watching this candle. Do we get a doji or a spinning top by the end of the week? Do we rally up further with the semiconductors and back down and get a nice looking doji or a topping tail in the form of a shooting star, something like that? Could be. In the weekly time frame, again, options expiration, you just never know. Earnings, we have tensions in the Middle East. So again, we'll be watching. Do we get a positive close? Do we get a sell-off? We'll be watching to see what the bar looks like as we've come up and we've slammed into the major trend line of resistance in the weekly time frame. But this is telling us, hey, prices are getting tired. Over here, you went higher. couple weeks and then you turned. We turned the very next week and diverged with the S&P as I talked about. So again, the time is short. I'm looking for a top, but again, the topping process still be under construction. One thing I'm watching is a daily chart. Again, we got the 13 count on the NASDAQ in the daily time frame a few sessions back. We have a 7 now of a 9 count on the S&P 500, which could complete by Friday. Now again, 9 count here, you got it, you went a little higher, then you got the dump. Here, again, a little bit higher, you got the dump. Other times, again, 9 counts, you see them play out immediately. I don't know that the count will finish, but it's certainly something worth watching. Every bar has to be above the bar from 4 bars ago. So we got to be above this bar by tomorrow's close. And then on Friday, we got to be above this bar at the close. We got to be above that bar. So if we go make a new high, then maybe the count completes. The 9 count, though, doesn't have to be the high. We could peak with bar 8, borrow on Thursday, sell off, still be above the bar from 4 bars ago, have the 8 bar the high of the count. So to keep that in mind, for it to be a perfected sell signal, just something I'm watching. Maybe the count gets canceled out. It does complete, we will have a 9-9 sell signal. We did have a 9 right here. It was not perfected until we got above bar 7, and that just gave us a pullback. And again, my little triangle developed at key support. If it does develop, we will have a 9 followed by another 9, which is a reversal pattern, something worth paying attention to. I don't know that the count completes, but if we do form those divergences on the intraday charts, 60-minute charts, it very well could complete a 9 count by Friday. The 9 count can mark an immediate reversal, or again, we go a little bit higher and turn. So something worth paying attention to if the rally can continue. Later in the video, I'll be talking about the divergences on the intraday charts. If so, that could complete a 9 count sell signal by Friday on the S&P. We already had the 13 on NASDAQ. I'll be showing you these charts later in the video. We got some warning signs for momentum. We have had a little pullback. Momentum line still bullish. My momentum indicators still bullish, but I'm watching again. Does this divergence begin to complete here immediately and we start seeing momentum flip this week, options expiration, or with Taiwan Semiconductor, or do we rally further just a little bit more time? So some things I'm watching. My momentum signals are still bullish, but divergences on indicators are still forming. They complete. P daily. MACD on the NASDAQ is starting to try to roll over. It hasn't crossed, but it's turning down. Not there yet with the Dow and the S&P 500. We still have those rising wedges. You'll see them if you watch the video all the way through. Again, you got a divergence here. Is it done? Buy a little bit more time. And again, I'll be watching closely. Signals, momentum, still bullish. Momentum line, still bullish. Again, told you over here, turned bearish. Predicted these short-term pullbacks, but then told you we were going to go up and fill the gap. We did. Looking for the next time momentum flips back to bearish. Taiwan Semiconductor give us a rally for the NASDAQ, or does it cause a sell-off? We'll be watching. Please support the channel with the link directly below. That allows me to be able to provide you this information. You like the charts, you like the indicators, let me know that by supporting the channel. The link below to take you to a secured site. You can donate any amount you want or make it a recurring donation. If you do that, I thank you. I ask you to partner with me, because I don't want any sponsors. They contact me, I turn the offers down because I don't want to sell you a bunch of junk you don't need. I want you to pay triple commissions for gold. Shady deals on the internet, man. If you could take a moment to help out, I would really, really appreciate it. The money made on YouTube is through sponsors. I don't choose to have any, so I just ask that you do what you can to help out. I thank you for your consideration for that. Quickly, I just want to talk about my risk model. Even with the semiconductor sell-off there, again, we're still in a risk-on environment. We're still in risk-on. But the S&P moved to a new high. Risk-on is not moving to a new low. What happened at the last peak over here? You see something similar to that with this rising wedge that is under construction. Just had an overthrow of the other trend line. But again, we are still in a risk-on environment. We still have a bullish S&P trend. So we need to do more technical damage if we're going to get confirmation that the peak is in. There's still the possibility we go up and we hit this upper boundary again. Form divergences on the 60-minute charts. But this is telling us, hey, a top is likely under construction here and probably going to play out very soon. That's the signal and the message here with the risk on signal in my risk, with my risk model. Now, Tomorrow morning is going to be very, very important. We're going to get Taiwan Semiconductor earnings. And earlier in the week, we had a very negative reaction. Tuesday, the ASML earnings were accidentally posted on their website early, and they were a nightmare. Semiconductors sold off, and we're going to be watching. Do the semiconductors continue to sell off on semiconductor tomorrow morning, or are we going to get a relief rally? NASDAQ bounced out the 20 period. I talked about this yesterday. I talked about the divergences that can form in the 60-minute charts. I'll show you that. Be watching. Do we start getting big semiconductor sell-off, get a relief rally? We're forming rising wedges on the Dow and the S&P, and now we're setting one up on the NASDAQ near that gap fill area. So very important earnings. And then we have Netflix after the bell. So we'll be watching. Do we close? And remember, I talked about, do we close strong? Do we close weak? With the gap fill, I told you I thought the gap would fill this week. It can play out a number of different ways. We can get an immediate reversal with the NASDAQ, dance around the gap fill area for a while. The charts in just a moment. So tomorrow, really, really important. And then next week, we're going to be getting some fantastic, Magnificent Seven. I was going to say Fantastic Four. Magnificent Seven stocks. And again, over the next 2 weeks, we're going to be getting a lot of S&P 500 earnings. Again, the Taiwan Semiconductor earnings will be before the bell. This is going to really be the market mover tomorrow is Taiwan Semiconductor. Remember, on Tuesday, ASML was a big drag. We dropped 16%, 17% at the low, down another nearly 6.5% today. So again, this was a drag on the semiconductors earlier in the week, and now trying to rebound with NVIDIA today. Not ASML, still down. Semiconductor was down yesterday too. It's trying to rebound off the 10-period moving average. Again, very similar pattern to what I'm looking for on NASDAQ and on NVIDIA is a potential double top pattern. Now here, again, we've gone slightly higher on NVIDIA. We're still slightly below. I'm watching to see, does NVIDIA make a new high? And again, these double top patterns is what they often do. They'll make a lower high, but sometimes they make a higher high, often than not. I don't think NASDAQ does. We have that longer term trend line in the monthly and the weekly time frame, those trend lines that I've talked about, slightly above the previous peak. But oftentimes with these double top patterns is what happens. Get the short squeeze on the way up. Once all the shorts have been squeezed, then you get a false breakout, often moving slightly above the previous peak. This is what Bitcoin did in 2021. It had a peak. It moved above the previous peak just ever so slightly. And then you got your rug pull. Suck all the bulls in. They do the short squeeze on the bears. They suck the bulls in, and then they pull the carpet out from underneath them. And that's why double top patterns form. But I do think you're getting a double top pattern developing on NVIDIA, here on Taiwan Semiconductors. And again, a lot of the semiconductors, very, very similar pattern. Watching, do we get a bigger push higher, or do we start to break down? We've already moved slightly higher. Watching to see how the earnings are, and then how does the market react to it. See what's going on with NASDAQ in a moment. But again, tomorrow morning, Taiwan Semiconductor. Again, compare Taiwan Semiconductor here in the daily to the NVIDIA chart. Before I change charts, let me just say again, we had a divergence over here that marked this peak on Taiwan Semiconductor. They already have a divergence right here, almost two equal peaks, almost a Class B divergence. So again, maybe it's not done yet. Maybe we get one right here and we turn higher, and then we end up turning down. Maybe it's a bigger move. Maybe it's horrible and we start dropping. But again, real concerns about ASML earlier in the week. Get more concerns with Taiwan Semiconductor, or do we get a relief rally? Nice rally today on NVIDIA, up over 6% after that. That ugly drop, again, down to the 10-period moving average. NASDAQ actually took out the 10 and bounced out the 20 today. NVIDIA didn't go down that far, but NVIDIA, again, rallied up. I told you I've been looking for a double top. Again, I thought we'd see an ABC structure like what NASDAQ is doing. I could be wrong. We can go higher. You can still get a double top pattern. If NVIDIA goes higher, I don't think NASDAQ will. And again, sometimes they diverge. They diverged over here. NVIDIA made a lower high. NASDAQ in July made a higher high. NVIDIA closely, but again, double top pattern in play here. I think very, very possible. Now, again, we could form a divergence right here on the RSI. You didn't over here. Over here, you just reached an extreme, and that was the end of it. Maybe we just reached an extreme. We did tag extremes with our high from 3 days ago. We could still form a divergence in this most recent price action, go higher, push up through this, again, get above this 140 area, suck in the bulls, maybe go a little bit higher than drawn here, and then again, get a big rug pull. I think NVIDIA is forming a double top. I think NASDAQ's forming a double top. But again, important day tomorrow with the Taiwan Semiconductor earnings, and we'll be watching NVIDIA. NVIDIA recovering, still not taking out the highs. We'll see if it gets a lower high for a double top or a slightly higher high, and then we'll be watching. But I do think a double top pattern is forming with NVIDIA. Still don't have the MACD rolling over. It's still in positive territory, so we'll be watching what happens tomorrow, how it closes out the week. These rising wedges on the Dow and the S&P, and now it looks like NASDAQ's developing one in the more recent price action. The Dow goes back here to the August lows and that summer sell-off from the July high. But again, a similar pattern now developed on NASDAQ. And again, while I'm here on the Dow, again, we've got this diversion still going on. You got a multiple point divergence there on the thing. And again, we're slamming into that 125-year trend line. Dow up 337 points today, up 0.79. Again, slamming into this trend line yesterday, now rebounding back up. And again, I'll be watching the rising wedge pattern here on the Dow. And then the S&P got, again, a rising wedge. Now, again, this is going back to the August low as well. Included the shadow here. And again, you got a really nice looking triangle that formed right into that trend line. I talked about the triangle. Again, I told you I thought we'd have an upward resolution. I told you we could overthrow the upper boundary of the rising wedge right here, which we did. So again, we now have this trend line to be watching, which again, from these lows connected here, a little bit higher. And again, we could get diversions develop on those 60-minute charts and push up into this trend line, up into the trend line on the Dow again. But again, look, very similar diversions developing here on the MACD as we saw on the Dow. Now, again, if we start selling off and breaking down immediately, then maybe that's all she wrote. Again, we can redraw a trend line from here to here. Still very possible we get those divergences, as I've been talking about, on those 60-minute charts. Complete these divergences in the daily. So again, we're getting these rising wedges, the Dow, the S&P, and now on the NASDAQ. Don't take it from the August low. It's just from the lows there in early September. Let me show you. Now, first of all, I want to show you if we took it from the August low, it would be a bigger pattern here. Or if we took it from the peak here and here, it would be just the angle of ascent, just slightly higher than our recent peak and filling the gap. So again, if we draw it from the more recent price action, again, we could push up here again. I believe that we peaked over here on July 10th. I don't think we're going to move above that, but if we do, we have the trend line on the monthly chart, the trend line on the weekly chart, it's just directly above that level. My guess is you're going to set up a lower high. Told you, again, I told you the top over here when it happened. July 11th, we peaked on the 10th. I told you going into the 10th that we were about to peak. Warned you. It's lower on the 17th. Merging with the S&P on the 16th, we got a lower high. I told you eventually this gap's going to get filled, but I was predicting a sell-off. We're going to get a bigger high on S&P and new all-time high there. While the S&P or NASDAQ comes back and fills this gap, here we are. I was looking for an ABC structure here. I think we've got it. I think we will get a lower high. If I'm wrong about that, I told you exactly what's going to happen. We're going to go a little higher, and we're going to slam into those trend lines in the monthly and the weekly time frame. We got a doji today. We dropped below the 10. We tagged the 20, which is this blue line, and I've drawn a trend line from today's low going back to here. Got a pretty nice looking rising wedge if we connect these levels. Question now is, do we buy a little bit more time with Taiwan Semiconductor and go back up here and flirt with the gap fill a little bit more and dance around this area and then break down? Or do we just see a negative reaction and semiconductor sell off and we start seeing NASDAQ break down? We did get a bottoming tail in the form of a doji today on the NASDAQ. We were down most of the day. We ended up positive by 0.07%. We're up 14 points and close in negative territory. We close back above our 10-period moving average. We start taking out the 10, you start taking out the 20, then you're going to get a bigger sell-off. So again, Can this bottoming tail at our 20 period and our momentum cloud right here, can that give us a traction and maybe go back up here and again test this gap fill area, maybe exceed that level and further develop this potential rising wedge. Now, we also had a rising wedge over here. Now remember, I told you I had really good evidence of a top right here. I think a top's going to develop right here. Not enough evidence yet that it's in. I think a top will develop around the gap fill as I've been on the NASDAQ. And again, if we form those divergences on the 60-minute charts, on the 4-hour charts of futures, I talked about that yesterday. Again, we could still see a divergence develop with the higher high here, but still not exceed this peak over here. And again, get that double top that I'm looking for. Again, we might get closer to this peak. This was just under the 20,700 area, the high 20,600s. And again, we might get closer to that area. Certainly a possibility. So we're looking at these things with probability. I think it's probable that we see a peak very soon based on historical data, based on the divergences in the weekly time frame. But the topping process may take more time, and I've talked about this at great length and detail. About things that could rattle the market, tensions in the Middle East. Does that rattle the market? Maybe it doesn't. Maybe it does. We don't know. Geopolitical issues, sometimes there's a knee-jerk reaction. Sometimes it doesn't rattle markets at all. Other times it does. Simply don't know. Earnings season. Here we are. Before an election, you start getting some volatility. We haven't seen that. We've seen the NASDAQ go sideways, and when we've sold off in the summer, and then we've rebounded, but we haven't really seen the volatility in October going into the November election yet. Maybe we don't. Things to be thinking through. Again, earnings, tensions in the Middle East. Now, is the Fed going to cut rates at snail's pace? Concerns about the pace of the rate cuts. The economy is wonderful now with this fake jobs report that we had, which again, mark my words, it's going to be revised downward eventually. First or second revision, we'll see it revised downward. Inflation. So just a lot of things to under here. But again, be watching this gap fill area around the 20,400 area. We don't have the MACD rolling over yet on NASDAQ, the Dow, or the S&P. NASDAQ's a little bit closer to it. Does it happen? Does it not happen? I talked about this yesterday. I talked about the possibility of a semiconductor rally, Taiwan Semiconductor, if we try to form divergences here on the 4-hour chart. I talked about these 60-minute charts, getting possible divergences there on the RSIs. We can see the same thing here with the Awesome Oscillator. Rebound on the S&P. After the semiconductor sell-off, we're now seeing a green bar appear. So again, could we get a series of green bars and form a divergence? And does it drag out into Thursday, maybe on into Friday, or do we start selling off? We'll be watching to see how it plays out. Just continue here on the 4-hour chart of the S&P cash. Again, divergences on the RSI marked the peak here in July, on July 16th. Over here in late August, down to September lows, bottomed out with the jobs report. I told you we were likely going to bottom with the inflation data the following week. We did. Things turned back to bullish, but you had a divergence there. Then we had another divergence right here that we rallied up into with our recent peak before we formed the triangle that I talked about. Told you we were going to get another push up. Could we form another divergence on in this price action, this more recent price action here? Very well could. My guess is it probably will. We could just peak with an extreme, but oftentimes divergences form on the hourly and 4-hour charts. 4-hour time frame signals are still bullish here. The S&P 500. Let's look at the 60-minute charts to show you this up close real fast on NASDAQ. Again, we had the peak over here. It had a divergence. This peak was slightly lower than this one, and we had a divergence that's given us a sell-off. We had a gap and a trap on the intraday basis, but again, we're trying to find support on the cloud right here, just around or just below there, our 50-period moving average. Again, it's possible we go back up. Now, again, in July, we went back up. We got a lower high. Watching, and again, it could play out a number of different ways. I don't know the future. You don't know the future. I'm looking at the indicators, looking to the indicators for guidance. Hey, when will it be done? So I'm looking for evidence. I have the evidence yet that the top is in. Will I get it tomorrow? Do we sell off with Taiwan Semiconductor? We get that evidence? Maybe. Still the possibility here of a divergence. In the week with a 6-week winning streak and then just try to sell off, or do we start seeing a reversal this week, fill the gap? lower high? Do we get a higher high? Just start breaking down with Taiwan Semiconductor leading the charge lower. We'll see how it unfolds. I am looking for a peak here, just like I was looking for a rally. When I told you we were going to sell off after the July peak, I told you we were going to bottom. And again, even over here, this last low that formed, told you we were looking for a rally. Told you about the bull flag. Told you about the breakout, the back test. Everything's happened. We're going to come back, fill the gap. All happened now. Now it's time to be looking for a topping process. The rally that I was looking for, I think it's going to come to a conclusion. Signals are still bullish, so I'm looking for evidence. A divergence may develop still. Look at the 60-minute chart of the S&P. Now, we already had a little tiny divergence develop on NASDAQ in the more recent price action there. MACD had a little tiny one right here on the RSI, but again, we could see the MACD roll back up here, form a divergence, could see NASDAQ recycle back up. But take a look again. Little tiny divergence on some of the intraday charts gave us this pullback towards the 50. We didn't quite reach it. I talked about this. Similar to the July top. We came down towards the 50, but we didn't quite reach it. And then we ended up going slightly higher and completing this divergence. Do we see something like that right here? Very similar. I talked about divergence here, how we went down and we reached that 50, but then bounced off of it and formed the divergence. And then we had the sell-off down to the September low. August peak down to the September low, the July peak over here down to the August low. This divergence right here, we dropped below the 50, but we went sideways at horizontal support and got the triangle that I talked about. And I told you that was a continuation pattern. Told you that we would end up going higher, see NASDAQ fill the gap and all the rest of it. So again, did we get a diversion, something similar to this, on into this level? Now again, we slightly broke above that previous peak from this high to this high, but now we take it back further, and again we can go a little bit higher, carve that out. Now again, listen to me carefully. I'm just telling you possibility. Seeing a semiconductor sell-off, we start doing technical damage, then all bets are off. Did get a bottoming tail today at the 20 period on NASDAQ. Ahead of the Taiwan Semiconductor earnings, you still have a strong possibility divergences develop on these 60-minute charts. I'm showing you that possibility. But if we start seeing signals all begin to turn bearish, well, momentum flips. Maybe that's it. Momentum right now is still bullish. Signals remain bullish. Before we ever got the Tuesday sell-off with the semiconductors, on Monday I told you, hey, look, we could still form this divergence. I talked about divergence developing here ever since the triangle. I told you we might go up here, form a brand new divergence. We might build upon this one. We're forming a brand new divergence. At least we got a little one so far. I think it could evolve into a bigger one like over here or like over here. So just some things to be paying attention to. We do have this larger divergence on the MACD from the peak over here. Could get one in the more recent price action. I think it's very possible. Watching the 60-minute chart of the S&P 500. Time is short. I think a topping process is under construction. Signals remain bullish. I predicted the rally to new all-time highs. I'd be looking for a top. Looking for a crash. I'm looking for a top. A rally, the top, reversal. That's followed by the sell-off market and the crash. Don't get things out of order. Right now, I'm looking for the rally to continue to complete a topping process. Signals were correct, the triangle correct, support, the reversal, pretty amazing. Signals have called the pullbacks and the rallies back up, and again, the momentum has just been really, really good. Let me just bring it up here again. Momentum in the daily time frame, we're still above that 10-period moving average. We're still blue bars, green cloud. My signals are still bullish. Remember, we got the signals going back and forth here. I told you we were forming a triangle. I told you I thought we'd go higher. End up seeing divergences possibly develop. That seems to be the case. And some amazing turns back and forth with the signals, and then sideways, and then now up. So again, I'll be watching for the next time momentum turns back to bearish. My signals remain bullish. Do I think they're going to turn soon? Yes, I do, but my signals are bullish. They still go higher. We'll be watching the rising wedge patterns. Are they done yet? Form those divergences on the 60-minute charts. Again, we can go up and hit the upper boundary of those rising wedges. I'll be watching that very closely on the S&P 500. Remember, my target for the S&P is 5750 to 6,000. Why? That's resistance in the monthly time frame. I'm going to be watching for red bars here. Going to be watching, see if divergences end up forming and complete. We did get a red bar on the NASDAQ today. Do we see them turn back to green, or do we sell off and start taking out the 10 and 20 period moving average? We tried to drop below them today. We bounced off the 10 period yesterday. We tried to take it out today, and we bounced off that 20 period moving average. But you got a bottoming tail. You got a doji candlestick. So again, what do we see with this? Do we get a rebound back up, or is it the continuation doji that we start taking out the 10 and the 20 period moving average? I think it's really going to come down to the semiconductors. And again, do we start selling off immediately? Now, again, you can get red bars and again, starting to just produce a sell-off like over here in July, but you can also get red bars that are followed by green bars, and it takes its time a little bit longer. So we'll be watching which is this. Again, does this peak hold? We filled the gap. Is that all she wrote, or do we buy a little bit more time? Regardless, I'm looking for a top in that gap fill area, but it can unfold in a couple of different ways. And again, I'm not Nostradamus. I'm a guy that's just looking at support and resistance levels, trend lines, statically based indicators. I told you why I'm looking for a top there, because I believe we've already peaked because of the trend lines we've hit. So again, I'm looking at the facts. We hit a trend line, we hit resistance levels. Logical conclusion is, hey, maybe we have a top right here. Now, we could still go up and hit the trend line again. It goes further to the right. But again, just looking at facts and trying to evaluate things based on the technicals. Again, momentum still bullish here. Momentum signals, green cloud. It's turning red, but again, we still have the green cloud still holding above the moving averages, at least so far, the 10 and 20 period.